My name is Kelly. I married Tom when we were young and full of dreams. We were high school sweethearts, and I thought we would be happy forever. My dad, who owned a furniture factory, gave us a beautiful house as a wedding gift. 3 years later, our son Michael was born. As time went on, I focused on being the perfect housewife and mother. I kept our home clean, cooked nice meals, and made sure Michael had everything he needed. Tom worked as a sales manager, but his career wasn't going as well as he hoped. One night, he came home very frustrated and angry. He slammed his fist on the kitchen table and said, "I can't take this anymore. I'm working so hard for barely any money." I tried to stay calm and asked him what he wanted me to do. Tom's face lit up as he said, "Your dad could give me a job at his factory. You should talk to him." I was unsure because I didn't want to use our family connection, but seeing how desperate Tom was, I agreed to talk to my dad. The next day, I went to my dad's office and nervously said, "Dad, I need to ask you something. Tom isn't happy with his job. Is there a position for him at the factory?" After a moment, my dad said, "I'll give him a chance, but he'll need to prove himself like everyone else." When I told Tom the news, he was overjoyed. He picked me up and spun me around, saying, "You're amazing, Kelly. This is going to change everything for us." And for a while, it did. Tom started earning more money, and our financial worries lessened. But as one problem faded, another one appeared. My relationship with Tom's mother, Helen. Helen was very protective of Tom and didn't like me. She would drop by unannounced, criticize how I kept the house, and demand my attention. One afternoon, while I was cooking dinner, Helen burst in and said, "Kelly, I need you to take me shopping right now." I was frustrated and replied, "Helen, I'm in the middle of cooking. Can it wait until tomorrow?" She glared at me and said, "Are you saying my needs aren't important, considering everything I've done for this family?" I held back my anger, knowing it would only make things worse. "Of course not," I said. "Just give me a few minutes to finish up here." As I drove Helen to the mall, she complained about my driving, my cooking, and pretty much everything else. I couldn't help but wonder how my life had turned out this way. I was capable and smart, but here I was trying to please everyone else while my own dreams were forgotten. One frustrating afternoon, Helen came into our house unannounced, as usual. "Kelly," she called, her voice grating on my nerves. "I'm hungry. Make me something to eat." I bit my tongue and left the laundry to go to the kitchen. As I cooked, Helen sat at the table, criticizing everything I did. "You're using too much oil," she said, "and cut those vegetables smaller. Can't you cook properly?" When I finally set the meal in front of her, I hoped she would eat quickly and leave. But to my surprise, she packed up all the food and said, "I'll be taking this with me. I have bridge club tonight, and this will be good for snacks." I stared at her shocked. "Helen, that was supposed to be our dinner." She shrugged and said, "You can always make more. It's not like you have anything better to do." After she left, I sat down, feeling defeated. I glanced at the clock and realized I had less than an hour to make another meal before Tom came home. When Tom arrived, he found me frantically cooking. "What's going on?" he asked, loosening his tie. "Why isn't dinner ready?" I told him what had happened with his mother, hoping he'd understand. Instead, Tom's face darkened. "Mom was here, and you didn't make her feel welcome," he said angrily. "Kelly, you know how important family is to me. You should have been more accommodating." "Accommodating?" I repeated, stunned. "Tom, she took our dinner and treats me like a servant." Tom shook his head, annoyed. "You're exaggerating. Mom just wants to feel loved and appreciated. Is that too much to ask?" As we ate the rushed meal in silence, I felt a growing distance between us. Tom, who used to be my high school sweetheart and closest friend, now felt like a stranger. One evening, Tom came home from work in a bad mood. His face was red with anger as he slammed the front door. "Kelly," Tom yelled, "your father is a tyrant. He humiliates people and uses them like pawns in his little game." I was shocked. My father had always been fair and kind. What happened? I asked carefully. Tom's eyes were blazing with anger. "I stood up for an employee today because your father was treating him unfairly. And you know what your precious daddy did? He fired me on the spot." This didn't sound like my father at all. "There must be a mistake," I said. "Let me talk to Dad and hear his side of the story." "No," Tom shouted, making me flinch. "You will not talk to your father or your mother. They no longer exist for us. Do you understand?" Trembling, I nodded, too shocked and scared to argue. In the days that followed, Tom found another job and started earning well again. But the incident had changed something deep in our relationship. The warmth and love I once felt for him were replaced by fear and resentment. As the years went by and our son Michael grew up, he often asked about his grandparents, but Tom would shut down any conversation about them. "You have one grandmother," he would say firmly. "My mother. That's all you need to know." As Michael prepared to leave for college in another city, I felt a mix of pride and sadness. My baby was growing up, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing the only ally I had in the house. Over the next few years, my life fell into a dull routine. I catered to Tom's every wish and endured Helen's constant criticism. Without Michael around, their treatment of me became even harsher. One afternoon, as I was scrubbing the kitchen floor with Helen watching me closely, the phone rang. I reached for it, but Helen grabbed it and said, "I'll answer it. You focus on cleaning that floor. I can still see spots." I gritted my teeth and went back to cleaning. But I couldn't help but overhear Helen's part of the conversation. "Yes, this is the residence of Kelly." "Who, her father?" "I'm sorry, but Kelly isn't available. Please don't call again." My head snapped up. "Wait." I called out, but Helen had already hung up. "That was your father," she said coldly. "I told him not to call you again. You should thank me for protecting this family from those toxic people." I felt a rush of anger and frustration. "You had no right to do that," I said, my voice shaking. "He's my father. I should have been allowed to speak to him." Helen's eyes narrowed. "You ungrateful little." Just then, Tom walked in. "What's going on here?" he demanded. Helen immediately put on a hurt expression. "Oh, Tom, your wife is being so disrespectful to me after all I do for this family." Tom turned to me, his face dark with anger. "Is this true, Kelly? Are you disrespecting my mother?" I opened my mouth to explain, but no words came out. I realized with a sinking feeling that it didn't matter what I said, Tom would always side with Helen. A year had passed since that phone call from my father. Life continued in its stifling routine, with Tom and Helen's control over me growing tighter every day. Then, on a crisp autumn morning, everything changed. The phone rang while I was preparing breakfast. Tom was in the shower, and Helen hadn't yet arrived for her daily inspection of my housekeeping. For once, I could answer without interference. "Hello?" I said tentatively. "Kelly, is that you?" The voice on the other end was familiar but distant. It was my father's voice. "Kelly, it's your mother. She's very ill. The doctors don't think she has much time left. She needs you. We both do." Just then, I heard the bathroom door open. Tom would be down any minute. "I'll try, Dad. I promise I'll try," I whispered before quickly hanging up. When Tom entered the kitchen, I struggled to keep myself composed. "Who was that on the phone?" he asked suspiciously. I took a deep breath. It was my father. "My mother is very ill. She's dying. I need to go see her." Tom's face hardened. "Absolutely not. We've been through this, Kelly. Your parents don't exist for us anymore." I felt something snap inside me. For the first time in years, I stood up to him. "I'm going with or without your permission. She's my mother, and I won't let her die without saying goodbye." Tom's jaw clenched. "Fine. One day. That's all you get. And then you come back home where you belong." I nodded, unable to speak. One day was better than nothing. With trembling hands, I called my son Michael to tell him what was happening. To my surprise and relief, he immediately offered to come with me. The next morning, Michael and I set off for my childhood home. When we arrived, my father met us at the door. He looked older than I remembered, with deep lines etched into his face from grief. Without saying a word, he pulled me into a tight embrace. He led us to my mother's room. She lay in bed, pale and frail, but her eyes brightened when she saw me. "Kelly," she whispered, reaching out a trembling hand. "My baby girl." I rushed to her side and took her hand in mine. "Mom, I'm here. I'm so sorry. Can you ever forgive me?" She smiled weakly. "There's nothing to forgive, sweetheart. I'm just glad you're here now." We spent the day by her bedside, sharing memories and catching up. As the sun began to set, my mother's breathing grew labored. She squeezed my hand and looked into my eyes. "Kelly," she said softly, "promise me you'll really live your life. Don't let anyone cage your spirit again." Tears streamed down my face as I nodded. "I promise, Mom. I promise." She smiled one last time, then closed her eyes. Her hand went limp in mine. She was gone. Suddenly, my phone started ringing incessantly. I knew without looking that it was Tom. I answered the call and moved to the hallway for privacy. Tom's voice was sharp with anger. "Where the hell are you, Kelly? You were supposed to be back hours ago." "Tom, I can't leave yet," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "My mother just passed away. I need to stay for the funeral." "Absolutely not," he roared. "I told you one day, and that's all you get. If you're not back by tomorrow, don't bother coming back at all." His words felt like a threat and a promise all at once. For a moment, I was tempted to rush back to the life I knew, but then I remembered my mother's last words urging me to live fully. "Fine," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm staying." I ended the call before he could respond. My heart pounded. For the first time in our marriage, I had defied Tom, and it was both terrifying and liberating. The next few days were a blur of grief and preparations. On the day of the funeral, as we stood around my mother's grave, my phone rang again. Tom's number flashed on the screen. Without thinking, I hit the speaker button to silence it quickly. Tom's voice burst forth, loud and angry. "Kelly, this is your last chance. If you don't come home right now, I swear I'll come and drag you back myself. You ungrateful filth. After everything I've done for you." Tom's voice screamed through the phone before I quickly ended the call, my face burning with shame and anger. The people around us looked shocked, and Michael's face was a mask of fury. My father looked more concerned than anything else. He pulled me aside as soon as the service ended. "Kelly," he said gently, "we need to talk." We walked to a quiet corner of the cemetery, and my father took a deep breath. "Sweetheart, there's something you need to know about Tom. Something I should have told you years ago." I listened in stunned silence as my father revealed the truth about why Tom had really left the company. It wasn't because he had stood up for an employee. It was because my father had caught him stealing money from the company and manipulating prices to pocket the difference. "I fired him to protect the company and our clients," my father explained. "I didn't tell you because I thought you loved him and I didn't want to come between you. But now, seeing how he speaks to you and what your life has become, I can't stay silent anymore." I felt as if the ground had opened up beneath me. All these years I had believed Tom's lies, allowed him to cut me off from my family, and endured his and Helen's emotional abuse, all based on falsehoods. "There's more," my father continued, his voice grave. "I recently heard from a friend that Tom's company is under investigation. There are discrepancies. Kelly, I think he might be up to his old tricks again." As the full impact of his words hit me, I felt a strange mix of despair and liberation. The life I had known was falling apart, but from its ashes, I saw a chance for a new beginning. The day after the funeral, my father, Michael, and I returned to my house. To our surprise, the place was bustling with activity. Helen's friends were milling about, and the smell of food wafted from the open windows. We walked in to find a full-blown party in progress. Helen, holding a glass of wine, spotted us first. Her eyes narrowed as she took in my father and Michael. "Well, look who finally decided to grace us with her presence," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You're late, Kelly. My birthday celebration started an hour ago," Helen snapped. I was momentarily stunned. With everything that had happened recently, I had completely forgotten about Helen's birthday. Before I could respond, she thrust a dirty rag into my hands. "Don't just stand there," she ordered. "Start cleaning up these tables. They won't wipe themselves." My father, who had been silently observing, suddenly erupted. "How dare you speak to my daughter that way?" he thundered, making the room fall silent. "She's not a servant. She's a grown woman who deserves respect." Helen laughed derisively. "Respect? She gave up any right to respect when she married my son. Her family is Tom and me. You're nothing to her anymore." I watched in disbelief as my father and Helen argued, their voices rising. The party guests looked uncomfortable, unsure whether to leave or stay. Suddenly, Tom burst into the room. "What the hell is going on here?" he demanded, his eyes locking onto me. "Kelly, why aren't you serving the guests? And what are they doing here?" He gestured angrily toward my father and Michael. Something inside me snapped. Years of pent-up frustration and anger poured out. "No, Tom," I said, my voice steady and clear. "I'm not serving anyone. I'm not cleaning up, and I'm not staying silent anymore." The room fell deathly quiet. Even Helen seemed at a loss for words. "I know the truth, Tom," I continued, pulling out the divorce papers I had hastily prepared. I know why you really left my father's company. I'm done. I want a divorce." For a moment, Tom looked like he might lunge at me, but then, perhaps realizing he was outnumbered, he deflated. "Fine," he snarled. "Take your divorce. But don't think you'll get a penny from me." I couldn't help but laugh. "This house is mine, Tom. My father gave it to us as a wedding gift. Remember, you're the one who needs to leave." Tom and Helen left shortly after, casting venomous glares our way as they went. When the door closed behind them, I sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. Michael, who had been quietly watching everything unfold, finally spoke up. "Mom, why didn't you tell me things were so bad?" "I'm sorry, Michael," I said. "I thought I was protecting you, but I realize now I was only teaching you the wrong lessons about love and respect." In the weeks that followed, my life changed dramatically. The divorce proceedings began, and I focused on rebuilding my life. My father, true to his word, stood by me every step of the way. One afternoon, as we sat in his study discussing the future, he brought up a topic I hadn't expected. "Kelly," he began, his voice gentle but serious, "I've been thinking. I'm not getting any younger, and the factory needs new blood. How would you feel about coming to work with me?" I blinked in surprise. "Me? But Dad, I don't know anything about running a business." He chuckled. "Neither did I when I started. You're smart, Kelly. You can learn. Besides, it's about time you had a chance to spread your wings." Over the next few months, I immersed myself in learning the business. My father was a patient teacher, guiding me through the details of running a furniture factory. I discovered a passion for design and innovation that I never knew I had. Meanwhile, the divorce dragged on. True to form, Tom fought me every step of the way. He contested the ownership of the house and even tried to turn Michael against me. In the end, justice prevailed. I was awarded the house and substantial financial compensation for the years of emotional abuse. Tom, facing charges for his fraudulent activities, found himself deep in debt and unable to hold senior positions. As for Helen, she faded into the background, her influence over my life finally broken. The last I heard, she had moved in with a distant relative. Her social circle diminished after the truth about Tom came out. 3 years passed in what felt like the blink of an eye. One Sunday morning, my father called me into his office. His face was solemn as he gestured for me to sit. "Kelly," he said, his voice heavy with emotion, "I'm not well. The doctors don't think I have much time left." The world seemed to spin around me. "Dad, no," I whispered, reaching for his hand. He squeezed my fingers gently. "It's okay, sweetheart," he said softly. "I've had a good life. Now I can go knowing that you're strong, that you're free, and that you'll be okay." Tears streamed down my face as he continued. "I'm leaving everything to you, Kelly. The business, the house, everything. You've more than proven yourself. I know you'll take good care of it all." In the weeks that followed, we spent as much time together as possible. My father's condition worsened rapidly, but his spirit remained strong. He passed away peacefully in his sleep, leaving behind a legacy that I was now responsible for. News of my father's passing and my inheritance spread quickly through our small town. I was still adjusting to my new reality when an unexpected visitor arrived at my doorstep. On a crisp autumn afternoon, I heard the doorbell ring. Opening the door, I was shocked to see Tom standing there, holding a bouquet of flowers and looking apologetic. "Kelly," he said, his voice softer than I had heard it in years, "I'm so sorry about your father. May I come in?" Reluctantly, I stepped aside to let him enter. We stood in the foyer, an awkward silence hanging between us. Finally, Tom spoke up. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, Kelly, about us, about our life together. I know I made terrible mistakes, but I've changed. My mother passed away last month. She was always the one who came between us. Now there's nothing stopping us from being happy together again." As I opened my mouth to respond, I heard a car pulling up in the driveway. A moment later, the front door opened, and a tall, distinguished-looking man walked in. "Kelly, darling, I'm home," he called out, then stopped short when he saw Tom. Tom looked between us, confusion and anger dawning on his face. "Who the hell is this?" Tom demanded. The man stepped forward, extending his hand to Tom. "I'm David, Kelly's husband." "And you are?" Tom ignored the outstretched hand, his face contorting with rage. "Husband? What the hell, Kelly? You were married? You traitor." David's expression hardened. He stepped between Tom and me, his voice low and dangerous. I suggest you leave now and never speak to my wife that way again, David said firmly. Tom lunged forward, but David was quicker. He grabbed Tom by the arm and guided him to the door. This is your only warning, David said calmly. Stay away from Kelly. If you ever come near her or insult her again, you'll regret it. With that, David shut the door, and Tom's angry face disappeared as the sound of screeching tires faded away. David turned to me, his face softening with concern. Are you okay, love? I nodded, stepping into his embrace. I'm fine. I'm just glad you're home. Looking up at him with a smile, I added, and I'm glad you waited for me after all these years. David chuckled and pressed a kiss to my forehead. I've loved you since high school, Kelly. I would have waited forever if I had to. As we stood there in each other's arms, I marveled at how life had come full circle. David and I had been high school sweethearts before Tom came into the picture. After my divorce, we had reconnected, and our old feelings had blossomed anew. We had married in a quiet ceremony 6 months ago, starting a new chapter in both our lives. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Michael. Mom, great news. Jessica's pregnant. You're going to be a grandmother. In the months that followed, life settled into a beautiful rhythm. Michael and his wife Jessica moved back to our city, eager to be close to family as they prepared for their baby's arrival. They joined us at the factory, bringing fresh ideas and energy to